the game doesn't have to end with maces and talons. We can just play another game. What do you say, NG? You in?
I'll pass.
Oh, come on, it's a board game. What harm could one little board game do? You know, with a title like Triple Cross, I'm really not expecting to be surprised.
That's the final irony, I suppose.
Okay, maybe I was surprised a little bit. Wow. Well, okay. Pretty much all I can say is that this episode was good. I mean, really good. I mean, there's a lot that I can talk about, stuff that I want to talk about in great detail, and my mind's racing. My mouth can't keep up, so I'm sorry if I stutter a lot, but God, I feel like I'm reviewing Avengers Infinity War. Okay, alright, I'm gonna do my best. Premise of this episode is that Vigo is betrayed by Johan, and so he gets Hiccup's help to get revenge, along with the Skrill, and they both raid the island that they're hiding out on, in order to get all the lenses that Johan and his flyers have gathered. It turns out that they're hidden somewhere else, and Vigo, sacrifices himself for Hiccup to get away, and he dies. He dies in this episode, and because of this, Hiccup can now put away maces and talons, thus kind of signifying the end of this constant struggle between the riders and the hunters, or at least between Hiccup and Vigo, and the episode ends. I mean, I don't. This is kind of a struggle just to even, focus on a straight up review, because there's so much that I could talk about, and just like new ideas just come popping into my head, and so hopefully I can speak clearly. I don't, zigzag all over the place. I can hopefully keep this just focused and narrow. Okay. The entire focus of the episode is not really just to set up the climax of the final season. It's really just to focus on these two characters, Hiccup and Vigo. And the interaction is just unbelievable. It's so great. Instead of just being, so plot-centric, it's more character-centric. It's just focusing on the interaction between these two. And yes, I know that's kind of a repetition of what I just said. Like I said, my mind is racing. This episode was so good. What else do I have to say? Can I just end this episode right here? No, standards won't let me. Vigo really becomes a really great character. Actually, he was kind of always a great character. But to just see his perspective do this complete 180 from what we've known him as, there's still this bit of mischievous, conniving underhandedness that aura about him. But honestly, it's kind of nice to know that he didn't do a complete 180 personality-wise, kind of like in one episode of The Simpsons where Homer actually becomes a genius. The whole thing is that when Vigo is left for dead in a cave, and it looks like a monstrous nightmare is about to kill him, camera cuts to black. But apparently, in that time, Vigo has actually learned to respect and trust the dragons, even care for them. Keep in mind, this was a character who viewed everybody, his minions, and any type of dragons, his own brother, as pawns. He saw everything as a game, and his only goal was whatever the outcome, whatever the end game was. And so, it's like Loki in Thor Ragnarok. You see, again, that's another new thing that did not come up while I was trying to rehearse for this. Yeah, this episode is great. It's great. How many greats do I have to get out before I can finally focus on this damn thing? Oh yeah. I guess there's nothing bad about it. There's not anything that's even worth focusing on, like any logical inconsistencies, any kind of breaks in continuity, nothing illogical. There's hardly anything bad to talk about other than just the standard. They didn't animate the characters in one of them. I think I can see some stock footage in those fire assets. No. The story and the interaction between Vigo and Hiccup is just overshadowed everything. Even the B plot, which I don't even think it was much of a B plot. It's just the twins trying to set a record. I don't really care about it. I don't think anyone else cared about it. I mean, it was good for a laugh, but that was because the majority of the plot was just dramatic. So, what I'm just going to talk about is just how this one important scene that pretty much sets up everything about How to Train Your Dragon 2. Okay, for one, Vigo mentions or hints twice at Drago. Doesn't mention him by name, of course, just says as this employer. And it's kind of nice that mentioning this to Krogan in terms of his failures is just enough to set him off, which that's what I wanted to see from him in season 5. That's what we liked, what me and Tyler liked about him in Edge of Destruction, or even just in Wings of War. But, so yeah, it was nice to see a little bit more depth to Krogan, but like I said, Vigo was the one that had the most depth, the most character development, the most transformation. This was more or less his episode in how he was kind of like a mentor, or even a voice of reason, and as well as unexpected ally to Hiccup in his fight against the Flyers and Hunters. So, okay, I deviated a little bit. Back to the main focus. There were 2 good moments in this episode that I loved, that I thought really not only set up for movie 2, but also just kind of ended this whole, but kind of was a good use of this whole, a good way to end this whole Vigo versus Hiccup arc. One is the campfire scene, which it adds a sense of dramatic irony in terms of movie 2, whereas when where Vigo pretty much just Vigo tells Hiccup that he's too innocent and he's too pure, that he needs to be ruthless. And and which is kind of what is kind of what it's cause that's kind of the whole reason for that moment in How to Train Your Dragon 2, because if Hiccup was actually ruthless, or at least didn't try to convince Drago of how intelligent dragons were, then Stoic might have been alive. But and this is just my take on it, Vigo was already a unique villain. You can pretty much hear us praise, just his character and how he's written in his introductory episode. But what makes him unique to Hiccup is that he is the one enemy that essentially does have the personality, even the mentality of Drago, but he becomes an ally. The same. Now, a lot of Hiccup's enemies, like Stoic, Alvin, Dagger, even minor ones like the Defenders of the Wing, have all become allies because Hiccup was able to convince them of the truth about dragons. But Vigo is special because of the previous reasons that I mentioned before. And seeing his interaction with the Skrill, of how much he respects this dragon, all dragons, and how he pretty much admits of how wrong he was, is also what sets Hiccup up for failure in movie 2, because he thought that if he could convince Vigo, then maybe he could convince Drago. The difference is that, of course, Hiccup he's still a very young man. Vigo, the reason why Vigo was able to outwit Hiccup was because he's a lot older, he has more experience, but also Drago was just too far into his madness to just not see reason. Whereas Vigo is intelligent. He hasn't seen enough tragedy, at least from my point of view, my take on him, to just be utterly lost. So this is, and of course Hiccup also has experience with Vigo, whereas Hiccup had none with Drago. All he could go off of was word of mouth from Stoic. So yeah, that's also what makes this episode so good, is because it adds the dramatic irony to it. At least to movie 2. We, the audience, know what's going to happen, but the characters don't. And so that's just the major one. The other is that Vigo is pretty much what gave Hiccup inspiration for his current version, or his later version of the Inferno. You have the skeletal frame of the sword, and you have a canister at the end that contains zippleback gas. Now, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, okay. I would prefer that Hiccup is the one that came up with that on his own, but sometimes you don't just create things out of thin air. You do have to get inspiration from someone. I guess that's why I'm more accepting, because it wasn't Vigo that added the flint at the end of Inferno that sparks the zippleback gas. Hiccup came up with that himself. With Vigo, he just released the gas and then took his flame sword and chopped it. Still pretty works, but again, that's how ingenuity, that's how creativity works. Is that if you're inspired by something, you do what you saw one person did, or what you saw one form of art. That's just that's just how inspiration works. You see something that's been done before, and you spin and you give it a spin to make it unique to yourself. And so that's what I like. Of course, the Skrill does come back, or at least another Skrill. Who knows? Might have been the same Skrill. I mean, it did fly off. It did fly off in an earlier season. And so yeah, which again shows that they're setting up to end this season spectacularly. Now that was the first moment. Just second one is, of course, the ending. I think we can all agree that the ending was just very well done. Hiccup takes the Maces and Talons piece that Vigo gave him, the Accomplice, sets it on the central island of the game board, and tips it over. Pretty much visually telling us that Vigo's gone, he's not coming back again. It's over. And to even sell it further is that Hiccup closes the game, which shows us that it's never going to be played again. All while this really great dramatic music plays in the background. It's not overpowered. There's no Hans Zimmer boom to it. It's a slow piano song with some bass strings playing below it, and it's just so well done, and it's just amazing. And yeah, I think that's pretty much that's all I can say. I'm just keeping my eye on the time, making sure I don't run out of space on the card. But I got enough space for what I've always been doing for this episode. DreamWorks, release the discs. Seriously, I want physical copies of this show, and especially after this episode, I want them even more now. Also, because of that ending, release the soundtrack, as I know a few other people want the music from the series. And finally, show the Night Fury babies.